It happened the moment the announcer called my sister, S name, Claire Montgomery, summa cum laude. The crowd erupted like a dam bursting. My mother sprang up so fast, her hat toppled sideways. Dad whistled loud enough to draw stares. Aunts and uncles clapped like they'd just seen the second coming. Someone even shouted, "That's our golden girl!" I kept my hands folded in my lap, because mine was next. Nicole Montgomery, the dean intoned, his voice smooth, professional, co-founder, Halcyon Biogenetics, doctorate in molecular pharmacology, magna cum laude. The applause was respectable. A few polite claps, maybe from strangers, maybe from people who didn't know they were supposed to be saving their energy for Claire. My parents stayed seated. I walked the stage alone, the hem of my robe swishing just slightly with every step. The sky overhead was a dazzling, photo-op blue. I remember thinking, absurdly, that it would have made a beautiful wedding day. I shook the dean's hand, smiled for the camera, and when I turned to face the sea of faces, scanning for my family, I saw them clustered in the third row. Mom dabbing at her eyes, but not for me. Dad had already turned to say something to Claire. Probably a joke. Probably one of the ones he saves just for her. Claire caught my eye then. Her smile was flawless. Camera ready. The kind she'd practiced for years. The one that said, "Of course I deserve this." I tilted my chin slightly, gave the camera what it wanted, but inside, something different buzzed beneath the surface. It wasn't jealousy. Not really. I'd outgrown that feeling years ago, burned through it like rocket fuel during every all-nighter, every investor pitch, every clinical breakthrough I made without them noticing. No, this was something else, a slow, delicious hum of anticipation. Because today wasn't just about the degrees. Today was about finally stepping into the light they never bothered to shine on me. I returned to my seat, careful not to let my heels catch the edge of the steps. The woman beside me, a professor I vaguely knew, leaned over and whispered, "That's some resume. Your company's in the news this week, isn't it?" I smiled politely. Yes. Phase 2 trials came back with 87% efficacy. She blinked. That's remarkable. The crowd cheered again, this time for someone else. But I was no longer listening. My heart was thudding in my chest, not from nerves, but from a strange, electric stillness, like standing on the edge of a cliff just before you decide to jump. They didn't see me yet, but they would. And when they did, let's just say, some truths don't need to be screamed. They just need to be seen. And the best part? I didn't have to say a single word. After the ceremony, the courtyard buzzed like a beehive. Grads posing in clusters, tassels swinging, parents beaming, a brass band in the distance playing some vaguely triumphant tune. Claire was glowing, draped in white and gold cords, bouquet in hand, surrounded by family like some benevolent queen holding court. Someone, probably Mom, suggested a photo. "Let's get one with Claire and everyone," she said, pulling out her phone and waving it like a baton. "By the fountain. It's prettier over there." I trailed behind as they moved into formation. Uncle Harold tried to get the lighting right, but the sun kept bouncing off Aunt Monica's giant sunglasses. Then I heard my own voice, calm, automatic, practiced. "I can take it for you." There was a pause, maybe half a second. No protest. No, "Oh, don't be silly, Nicole. Get in here with us." Mom just handed me her phone. Dad stepped aside to make room for Claire in the center. I studied the shot, angling them beneath the ivy-covered stone archway. Smiles bloomed on cue. Claire tilted her chin just right. Mom reached up to smooth down a strand of hair by her ear. "Ready?" I asked. "Say Halcyon," Claire chirped, grinning wide. I froze for the briefest second. Did she say that on purpose? Or was it just a word she'd picked up and forgotten where from? I clicked the shutter. Once. Twice. 3 times. Behind the lens? They looked like a picture-perfect family. Warm? United. successful. I almost admired it. The symmetry of it all, like they'd been preparing for this moment longer than I knew. Got it, I said, handing the phone back. Thanks, sweetheart, Mom said distractedly, already scrolling through the shots. Oh, this one's good. Claire, your smile. We should send this to the alumni magazine. Dad leaned in. We should frame that for the living room. Finally, something next to Claire's debate trophy. He chuckled. No one looked at me. I stepped back, out of the way as they gathered again, this time adding in cousins and Claire's favorite professor. Someone handed me another phone, and I took the picture, again. I watched through the screen as they laughed and adjusted and celebrated, watched how easily I disappeared into the backdrop. You'd think after years of this, it wouldn't sting anymore. But it always does. Just a little. It's not the absence of praise that hurts. It's the way absence becomes routine. Expected, easy, like no one ever even asked the question. Where's Nicole? And honestly, that's what I wanted them to ask. Not to fawn, not to gush, just to notice. But they didn't. They never do. A breeze kicked up just then, rustling the leaves overhead. A graduate walked by in regalia identical to mine. Her mother was crying, snapping pictures like they were gold. Her father kept saying, "I'm so proud of you, baby." I stood there holding 2 cell phones, trying not to look like I'd forgotten how to smile. The sun was warm on my shoulders. The sky was still a perfect shade of celebration. But something inside me had gone a little quiet, and maybe that was fine. Because silence, I've learned, makes room for the truth. And the truth was already beginning to take shape, just not where they were looking. The reception hall was all brushed steel and modern minimalism, one of those expensive university event spaces that somehow managed to feel both impressive and cold. White roses floated in tall glass cylinders on every table, Claire's favorites. The lighting had that soft, gold-filtered glow that made everyone look like a polished version of themselves. Everyone, except me. I was near the back, just past the last row of tables, sipping a glass of water that had long since gone lukewarm. I didn't mind. It gave me something to hold. A reason not to mingle. I could see Claire from across the room, surrounded again, laughing in that high, rehearsed way that meant she was turning it on for someone important. Probably one of Dad's clients, or someone with a yacht. Then I heard her say it, loud and clear, for maximum effect. "This is Liam, my fiancé." The words sailed through the air, feather light, meant to land softly, but in my chest, they struck like a stone. I turned, ever so slightly, just enough to get a glimpse. He was tall, handsome in a coastal, yacht club kind of way. Perfect teeth, that smooth confidence that comes from money and proximity to power. The kind of man who knows how to enter a room without tripping over the spotlight. CFO, his name tag said, in slick serif font. Halcyon Biogenetics. I froze. That name? I knew it like the inside of my own mouth, because I built it. My fingers curled tighter around the glass. Not in anger, not even in shock. Just curiosity. What were the odds? Claire's fiancé, standing there in his pressed navy suit, was an executive at the company I co-founded. Not just that, he was one of the newest hires. I remembered approving his transfer 6 weeks ago, had barely glanced at his photo. Back then, he was just another mid-tier suit from the finance sector, looking for a jump into biotech. I hadn't met him in person. Not until now. And he didn't know me. Not yet. He leaned down to kiss Claire's temple, then turned toward the next wave of introductions. More smiles, more handshakes. I stayed where I was, watching him, calculating, not because I had a plan. I didn't, not yet. But something had shifted. I could feel it, like a pressure drop right before a storm. Claire caught sight of me and waved half-heartedly, like someone acknowledging the waiter instead of a sibling. I raised my water glass in response. It would have been easy to walk over, say hello, introduce myself properly. But I didn't. I wanted to see what happened when the introductions came from them. when he heard my name from someone else's mouth. Because sometimes, it's not what you say that matters, it's what you don't have to say at all. And in that moment, standing in the shadows while my family toasted someone else's future, I wasn't just biding time. I was letting the silence do its work. It happened during dessert. Someone, I think it was Aunt Monica, had cornered me at the bar, all curiosity and Prosecco breath. "So what are you up to these days, Nicole? Still doing computer stuff?" Computer stuff. Right. I gave her the shorthand. I'd perfected it over years. I co-founded a biotech firm, Halcyon Biogenetics. We're focused on neuroimmune therapeutics. It's been a busy year. Our lead compound just cleared phase 2. Her eyes glazed over at neuroimmune. She nodded politely and reached for another shrimp skewer. But someone else had been listening. A beat later, a smooth, masculine voice cut in. "Wait, Halcyon Biogenetics?" I turned, slowly. Liam stood there, glass in hand, the polite fiancé expression slipping ever so slightly. "Yes," I said. My voice was calm. Maybe too calm. "I'm one of the co-founders." His eyes flickered, scanning my face again, this time with new context. Like he was realizing the cover of a book he'd never read had been written in his own handwriting. "You're Nicole Montgomery?" he said, more a revelation than a question. I offered a modest smile. "That's right. I just started last quarter," he added quickly, "transferred in from Telcor Finance. We were told the founders were mostly behind the scenes now." I took a slow sip of my drink. "I've been a little busy, but I still review all executive hires." There it was, the shift. I watched it happen in real time. His posture straightened, smile stiffened, pupils tightening just a bit. He was recalibrating. Claire appeared beside him, a glass of wine dangling from her fingers. "Nicole, there you are. Liam was just saying how much he loves his new role. Isn't that great?" "HMM?" I said. "We're lucky to have him." Liam gave me a longer look this time, a slower one, like he was turning a mental page, and realizing the main character had been standing 3 feet away the whole time. He opened his mouth to say something, but Claire interrupted with a laugh. "He's always so impressed with the leadership there. Keep saying how brilliant the research division is." I tilted my head, just slightly. "That's good to hear. I put a lot of thought into that team." She blinked. "You did?" I nodded once, offering nothing more. It was enough. Liam said nothing, but I could feel his mind running laps. Somewhere behind that polished grin, the math was clicking into place. The Nicole he'd vaguely seen in email CCs, the name under signatures, the distant figure in investor briefings, the same woman standing quietly at his fiancé's graduation, sipping flat seltzer like she wasn't holding the room's biggest secret in her back pocket. He knew now. Not everything, not yet, but enough. And I didn't have to say a word. I was walking back from the terrace when I heard it, her voice bright with awe. "Oh my God, you're Nicole Montgomery from Halcyon? I just read about your trial results in Forbes. Your name's all over the industry board." The woman had stopped me near the espresso bar, one hand clasped over her heart like she'd just spotted a celebrity in flats and minimal makeup. "I work in clinical analytics," she continued. "We've been following your compound's progression since the preclinical data dropped last spring. It's revolutionary? Seriously." I thanked her, said something humble and practiced. But before I could escape, she turned to the man beside her. Older, graying temples, expensive shoes. "Honey, this is the founder I was telling you about. She built the neural lipid scaffolding process from scratch." The man offered a hand. "Impressive. You're making waves, young lady." "Just trying to make something that helps people," I replied. And then I saw them, a few feet away, my parents. They were standing by the cheese table, fiddling with little plates, pretending they weren't listening. But they were. Their bodies had gone oddly still, frozen, like mannequins, mid-conversation. My mother was the first to speak, just loud enough for the couple beside them to hear. Oh yes, Nicole's always been into tech stuff, she said, fluttering a hand like she was talking about an old childhood hobby. She's very independent. Dad chuckled, glancing at the floor. Never needed much supervision. Always had her head in some book or another. The couple nodded politely, murmured something about brilliant minds, and moved along. And I smiled. A soft, practiced thing. But something inside me clicked. Not loudly, not angrily, just closed. Like a cabinet door gently swinging shut after you've stared at the same empty shelf for too long. They weren't cruel. They weren't even dismissive, really. They just didn't know what I'd done. Not truly. Or maybe they did, and didn't want to know what that said about them. Because if they acknowledged the weight of it, if they said it out loud, they'd have to ask why it happened without them. So they folded it into something palatable, something vague and safe. Tech stuff. Not, she built a biotech firm from nothing. Not, she's leading clinical trials that could reshape how we treat neurodegeneration. Not, she's on track to make medical history before 40. Just tech stuff. Like a puzzle we'd all agreed not to finish. Too many pieces. Too sharp around the edges. I turned back toward the espresso bar, suddenly tired. Outside the window, the sun had started to dip. Shadows stretched longer. Golden hour, they called it. The time when everything looked a little softer than it really was. And maybe that was the point of all this. A carefully lit celebration where everyone smiled the right way, said the right things, even when what was missing took up more space than anyone was willing to admit. The hotel room was quiet. Too quiet, almost aggressively so. Just the low hum of the mini fridge and the occasional groan of old plumbing behind the walls. I'd kicked off my shoes the second I walked in. My heels were still lying on their sides near the desk, like they'd collapsed from pretending too long. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap comforter stiff under my palms, and reached for my phone. 37 unread messages, 11 missed calls, and one alert at the top. Forbes, Halcyon's quiet genius. Drive Nicole Montgomery steps into the light. I stared at the headline for a long moment. No blinking cursor, no camera flash. Just those words, on a glass screen, in a room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and loneliness. I opened the article. They'd used the older headshot, the one from our Series A funding round. Hair tied back, no makeup, eyes a little wary, like I was bracing for something even then. The write-up was generous. Too generous, maybe. Called me a visionary, a quiet powerhouse. Said I'd disrupted not just a field, but a culture. I'd given them the numbers, the efficacy rates, the timelines. But they'd read between the lines. About the funding rounds I led solo, the grants I fought for, the boardroom full of men who shook Liam's hand before mine, every time. They saw me. I scrolled down. Quotes from my COO, a comment from an NIH rep, even a pull quote from someone at Genentech. Halcyon isn't just a biotech firm. It's a movement, and Nicole Montgomery is its heart. And beneath it all, the little blue notification bubble on my messages icon, glowing like a lighthouse. I tapped it. There they were. From Lauren. You did it. I hope you're finally letting this moment land. We're so proud of you. From Dr. Jensen. 87%. That's almost unheard of. This changes everything. Drinks on me when you're back. From Arun, our lead researcher, saw the Forbes piece. My mom framed it. She asked if I could get your autograph. Investor. Colleague. Board member. Mentor. Message after message. The same theme. We see you now. But not one from the people who taught me how to tie my shoes. Not a single message from my mother. Not even a good job from Dad. Not a confetti emoji. Not a thumbs up. Nothing. The silence wasn't shocking. It was predictable. Like a reflex I'd stopped expecting and still felt anyway. Like the way your hand twitches after touching something hot, even when you knew it would burn. I scrolled, slower now, hoping I'd missed something. That maybe there was a delay. A signal issue. a moment of hesitation they were still working through. But no, the last text from my mother was 2 days old. A logistics note. Claire wants to wear flats during the reception. Can you bring her nude pair from the apartment? The last text from Dad was a forwarded joke about AI writing obituaries. No, congrats. No, we saw you on the news. I set the phone down beside me. Face down, not out of anger, just fatigue. Because it's one thing to be invisible, it's another to be indispensable to the world, and still overlooked by the two people whose opinion once weighed more than all the rest. I lay back against the pillows, eyes fixed on the ceiling, counting the tiny imperfections in the paint. And somewhere between breath 42 and 43, I realized I wasn't hurt. Not really. Just done. Done trying to earn something that was never coming. The knock came at 9:43 p.m., not a polite hotel hallway knock either. This one had purpose behind it. Firm. Familiar. Like the way he used to knock on my bedroom door before delivering bad news with a tired sigh. I already knew who it was. I took a moment to center myself before answering, smoothing down the edge of the blanket where I'd been curled up reading the clinical trial summary again, half for comfort, half for clarity. When I opened the door, he was standing there in khakis, and that faded blue blazer he always wore when he wanted to seem reasonable. Not fatherly, not warm, just in control. "Hey, kiddo," he gave a tight smile. "Dad?" I nodded once. "Everything okay?" He glanced up and down the hallway before stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Some things never changed. "I won't stay long," he said, settling awkwardly on the corner chair like he wasn't sure if this counted as enemy territory. "I just wanted to talk." "All right." I kept my voice even, unhurried. He cleared his throat, picked at a thread on his cuff, then looked up. "You know your sister's wedding is coming up next month." There it was. I gave a small nod. "Well," he continued, "your mother and I have been trying to juggle the numbers, and between the florist and the venue and the deposit on that barn, Claire wants for the welcome dinner. Things are tight, tighter than we expected." He let the sentence hang, dangling between us like a fishing line. I didn't take the bait. "So," he added, "we were hoping maybe you'd be able to help out a little. Just float a few of the big-ticket items until after the honeymoon. Nothing permanent. We'd pay you back, of course." I let the silence stretch, just a few seconds longer than was comfortable. "I can't do that," I said simply. He blinked. "Sorry? I'm about to launch Phase 3 trials," I replied. "Our budget's already locked, and I need to keep capital fluid for post-review implementation. Every cent is accounted for." He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. "But Claire's wedding, I know." There was a beat of stunned silence, and then something shifted in his posture. Not outrage exactly, just surprise, as if it had never occurred to him I might say no, that I might not bend even now. "I'm not asking for much," he tried again, "just enough to keep everything running smoothly. She really wants this to be perfect." "I'm sure she does," I said, "but I'm not in a position to bankroll that perfection." He exhaled hard through his nose. "You've always been good with money." I figured. That's because I've always planned for the fact that no one else would show up for me when it mattered. His head snapped up. I didn't flinch. He looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time in years, I saw him actually see me. Not the background character, not the problem solver, not the sister in the wings, just me. "I see," he said finally. I gave a small nod. "I think maybe you do." He stood slowly. His movements felt older than I remembered. "Well, I won't take up more of your time." At the door, he paused. "Claire won't understand." "I know. She'll take it personally. She usually does." He opened the door, then turned back one last time. "You've changed, Nicole." I met his eyes. "No. You're just seeing it now." The farewell brunch was hosted in one of those old colonial-style banquet rooms. Ornate wallpaper, too many chairs, linen napkins folded like swans. The kind of place where no one really relaxes, not even after the mimosas kick in. Claire was radiant, of course. Yellow sundress, hair curled just so, effortlessly commanding attention at the center table. The whole brunch had become an unofficial send-off for her and Liam, as if they were royalty preparing for their grand tour. I stayed toward the back again, near the windows, coffee in hand, watching the sunlight play across the cutlery. I hadn't planned to speak. I never do at these things. But then Liam stood up. Tall, confident, groomed like a politician. His fork tapped his glass with just enough charm to hush the room. "I just wanted to take a moment," he said, glancing around with that practiced smile, "to say how grateful I am to be welcomed into such a remarkable family." The room chuckled softly. Claire beamed at him. Liam looked down at her. "And to Claire, who amazes me every day. I can't wait to start this next chapter together." The applause came easily. Then he turned his gaze toward me. "And to Nicole," he added, lifting his glass slightly, "who, as it turns out, I owe more than I realized." Claire's smile flickered. "She was the one who approved my transfer to Halcyon," Liam continued. "I had no idea until yesterday that the Nicole I kept hearing about in strategic memos was this Nicole." A ripple moved through the room. "She's my direct report now," he said, voice still smooth, but tinged with something quieter. "Which means, technically, I work for my future sister-in-law." Claire's expression froze so fast it might have shattered. The room did that thing polite rooms do when they're confused. Smiles dimmed just a bit, heads tilted, forks paused midair. Mom's hand hovered over her orange juice like she forgot what it was. Dad blinked at Liam, then at me, then back at his plate. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't smile. Liam, to his credit, kept going, maybe realizing too late that he'd just shifted the axis of this family brunch. "And I have to say," he added, this time a little softer, "I've never seen leadership like hers. Clear, strategic, visionary. She's built something extraordinary. It's been an honor just to join the team." Silence. The thick, pregnant kind. Then a few claps. Tentative. A cousin or two. Someone trying to cut the tension with etiquette. I caught Claire's eyes. She was still smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes anymore. Her fingers gripped the stem of her champagne flute like she might snap it in half. Across the table, Mom leaned in and whispered something to Dad. He looked at me like he was trying to reconcile a photo with the wrong caption. Liam sat down slowly, folding his napkin like he'd just remembered he was sitting in a minefield. I took a sip of my coffee. No toast, no speech, just the quiet satisfaction of a truth that finally arrived, courtesy of someone they couldn't ignore. And the best part? I still hadn't said a word. It started slowly, like steam rising from a cup no one realized was hot. First, a whisper near the breadbasket, a cousin murmuring to his wife, who responded with a startled glance in my direction. Then someone near the mimosa pitcher leaned toward their neighbor, gesturing subtly toward Liam, toward me, back to Claire. It was spreading. Soft ripples, widening. I sat perfectly still, coffee cradled in both hands, the ceramic warm against my skin. I didn't need to say anything. The room was doing the work for me. Liam leaned slightly toward my parents, who had stiffened in their seats. "I should have made the connection earlier," he said, voice pitched low but not low enough. "Your daughter? Nicole? She's the one who greenlit my onboarding. I report directly to her now." Mom blinked rapidly, twice, like she was trying to reset the image in front of her. Dad looked down, then up again, jaw tight. Liam added, almost apologetically, "I didn't realize your daughter built the company I've dreamed of working at since grad school. Halcyon was always the one we all talked about in finance circles. Smart money, fast growth, mission-focused. It was the kind of praise they usually couldn't get enough of. But now, it sat like an unwelcome centerpiece, too large, too shiny, drawing attention they hadn't prepared for. "Oh," Mom finally said. "Yes, Nicole's always been bright." She said it the way people say, "Oh, the mail came," or "It looks like rain." Claire's smile stayed in place, but something brittle had crept in around the edges. Her eyes flicked to Liam, then back to me, then away. Aunt Monica leaned over from the next table, loud enough to cut through the hum. "Wait, Nicole runs Halcyon? As in the Halcyon?" I smiled politely. I co-founded it. She gaped. "But why haven't we heard more about this?" I shrugged. "No one ever asked." That landed like a pin dropped in a cathedral. Dad cleared his throat, then reached for his water glass. "Nicole's always been independent, never wanted a fuss." Not true, but easier than the truth. The forks resumed scraping plates. Glasses clinked, chairs shifted, but the air had changed. The careful choreography of the family dynamic, Claire at the center, the rest of us orbiting, had faltered. Now there was a new gravity in the room, and it wasn't hers. She found me in the corridor behind the event room, where the carpet smelled faintly of old coffee and lemon polish. I was scrolling through emails, half smiling at a message from one of our trial coordinators who'd called the brunch story better than Succession. Nicole. Her voice was tight. Controlled, like a dam that knew exactly how much pressure it was under. I turned. Claire stood, with her arms crossed, posture rigid, that yellow sundress now slightly wrinkled at the waist. She looked like a woman holding a wine glass that had just cracked in her hand. "You planned that," she said. No greeting, no preamble. "Planned what?" "Don't play innocent," she snapped. "You knew exactly what would happen the moment Liam spoke. You let everyone think you were just some side character, and then, bam. Suddenly you're the star of the show?" I studied her for a beat. Not with anger, with curiosity. "Liam spoke on his own," I said calmly. "I didn't say anything. You didn't have to," she hissed. "You sat there, all quiet and smug, letting the bomb drop while everyone gasped, like you'd been hiding royalty under your seat cushion." I almost laughed. "Is that what it felt like?" She blinked. "Don't do that. Don't twist things." I tucked my phone away and folded my arms, mirroring her stance, only looser, less brittle. "Claire, I've been building that company for almost 8 years. I've worked weekends, missed holidays, turned down interviews, awards. I never hid anything." "You didn't exactly tell anyone either," she countered. "I did, just not loudly." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "The question isn't why I didn't tell, it's why you never listened." That stopped her. I let the words land. "You never asked what I was doing," I said. "You never wondered why I missed birthdays, or why I was flying back from Zurich on Christmas Eve, or why investors kept calling during dinner. You just assumed I was still into tech stuff. You decided that was enough." Her mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't ambush anyone, Claire." I softened my voice, but not my message. I didn't bring reporters. I didn't give a speech. I sat in the corner with my seltzer. She stared at the floor, jaw clenched. "I didn't say anything," I added, quieter now. "You just didn't look." She flinched like I'd struck her. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence between us stretched long and raw, full of the years we'd lived parallel lives under the same roof, orbiting around a tension that only pointed in one direction. "You always made me feel like I had to compete with someone who wasn't even trying," she whispered, and there it was. Not fury, not even resentment, just the exhausted fear of someone who'd built her entire identity on applause, and now had to face the fact that the audience had been clapping for someone else. "I was never competing," I said. "I was surviving." She looked at me then, eyes wet, not with tears, but the sheen of realization. "I didn't come here to take anything from you, Claire. I just finally stopped giving pieces of myself away." And with that, I turned and walked back down the corridor, light on my feet, nothing left to carry. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist that had long since closed for the evening. I sat by the window, nursing a coffee that had gone cold hours ago, watching the street outside, bathe in the slow bleed of sunset. Their car pulled up across the way, a familiar silver SUV, packed tight with leftover decorations, half-wilted bouquets, and whatever strained smiles they could still manage to wear. I watched as Claire climbed into the back seat, her sunglasses already on, even though the light was fading. Mom adjusted the mirror 3 times. Dad gripped the steering wheel a little too hard. No one spoke. I could tell, even from this distance. Their mouths were still, their hands tense, their bodies leaning away from each other as if silence itself had weight. They pulled out slowly, disappearing down the street, without so much as a glance toward the cafe. I didn't wave. I didn't move. I just watched. And for the first time I could remember, I felt nothing sharp. No ache. No longing. No wild hope that they'd come rushing back with outstretched arms, suddenly seeing everything they'd missed. The truth was already out there now, hanging in the spaces between conversations they wouldn't know how to start, sitting heavy in the parts of themselves they didn't want to examine. And it spoke louder than I ever could have. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I wasn't the background noise. I wasn't a secret to be neatly folded away when it didn't fit the picture they wanted. I was here, whole, visible, unapologetic, not because they cheered for me, not because they finally understood, but because I stopped needing them to. I finished my coffee, tossed a few bills onto the table, and stepped out into the cooling air. The city was alive around me, buses sighing at corners, music leaking from open windows, the smell of rain somewhere in the distance. It felt like the world had cracked open just a little. And this time, I wasn't standing on the outside, looking in. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. No permission, no applause, no proof required. Just me. Finally, just me.